I thought the gym membership was just a slap in the face in front of our relatives, but I was wrong. 3 weeks later, a white envelope arrived at my work mailroom containing a past due notice for a loan I never signed. The property address was the house they gifted my sister. When I pulled the notary records, I found my signature forged on the closing documents. The night they laughed at me was not an ending. It was a cover. My name is Brooklyn Flores, and I am 32 years old. But standing in my parents' backyard in Madison, Wisconsin, I felt like a child waiting to be scolded. The summer air was thick, heavy with the scent of charcoal smoke and the expensive perfume my aunts wore like armor. It was supposed to be a celebration. My sister, Kendra, had finally graduated. It had taken her 6 years to finish a 4-year degree, funded entirely by the bank of Mom and Dad. But to look at the banners strung between the oak trees, you would think she had just invented the cure for a global disease. I stood near the edge of the patio, nursing a glass of iced tea that had gone watery an hour ago. I watched them. My parents, Linda and Ray, were holding court in the center of the lawn. My father was wearing his best linen suit, despite the heat, and my mother's hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection that not even a tornado could disturb. They looked like a magazine cover for the American dream, flanked by uncles, cousins, and church friends who were all smiling so hard it looked painful. The cameraman was the first sign that this was not just a barbecue. My father had hired a professional videographer to document the toasts and tributes, as the invitation had called them. The red light on the camera seemed to be the only thing my father was actually making eye contact with. He tapped his champagne glass with a silver spoon, the sharp ping cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Attention, everyone, attention, please," Ray boomed, his voice projecting with the practiced resonance of a man who loved the sound of his own authority. The crowd hushed instantly. The adoration in the yard was palpable. They loved Ray and Linda. They were the pillars of the community, the charitable souls, the parents who would do anything for their girls. "We are so proud today," my mother began, her hand resting delicately on Kendra's shoulder. Kendra beamed, tilting her head just enough to catch the best lighting. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. She always did. It was easy to look beautiful when your only job in life was to maintain your appearance and let others handle the difficult parts. Kendra has worked so hard to get here. I bit the inside of my cheek. I remembered the nights Kendra called me, sobbing because she had partied through finals week, begging me to write her essays. I remembered the tuition checks my father signed without blinking, while I had worked 2 jobs to keep my student loans from drowning me. But I said nothing. This was the script. I knew my lines: stand still, smile, and fade into the background. "And because we know how important independence is," my father continued, grinning like a game show host, "we wanted to give Kendra a head start on her new life." He pulled a large, thick manila envelope from inside his jacket. The videographer stepped closer, zooming in. The suspense was manufactured, thick and sugary. "Kendra, honey," my dad said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that could still be heard by the neighbors 3 houses down. "Here are the keys and the deed to your new home in Sun Prairie." The yard exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a detonation of approval. People gasped. My Aunt Susan shrieked. Kendra covered her mouth with both hands, performing shock with Oscar-worthy precision. "A house," someone yelled from the back. "Ray, you're crazy." "Only the best for our girl," my dad laughed, soaking up the praise. "It's a 3-bedroom, fully renovated, no mortgage. It is all yours, baby girl." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. A house, a mortgage-free house in Sun Prairie, where the market was skyrocketing. It was a gift worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I looked at Kendra. She was hugging our parents, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were dry and sharp as she looked over my mother's shoulder right at the camera. Then, the applause died down, settling into a low hum of envy and admiration. My father cleared his throat again. He turned his gaze toward me, for the first time all day. The spotlight swung in my direction. I stiffened. I did not want this. I had been living on my own since I was 18. I had built a life in Minneapolis, a quiet, stable life that I paid for myself. I did not need their money, and I certainly did not need their performance. Now, we couldn't forget our other girl, Ray announced, his smile widening. It was a different kind of smile now. It didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a predator playing with food. Brooklyn, come here. The crowd turned to me. I could feel their eyes, heavy and expectant. I walked forward slowly, my heels sinking slightly into the soft grass. I stopped a few feet away from them. We know you've been working hard too, my mother said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my teeth ache. And we know you've been struggling a bit with finding your balance. I frowned. I wasn't struggling. I was a senior data analyst. I owned my car. My credit score was immaculate. What was she talking about? My father reached into his pocket again. This time, he didn't pull out a thick manila envelope. He pulled out a small, standard white business envelope. It looked flimsy. We wanted to give you something that would really help you improve yourself, Ray said, loud enough for the people in the back to hear. Something to help you get into shape, get your life together. You know, he handed me the envelope. My hands were trembling slightly, not from excitement, but from a sudden, primal warning bell ringing in my head. I opened it. Inside was a single plastic card, orange and purple. It was a membership card for a discount gym chain, the kind that cost $10 a month. I stared at it. I looked up at my father, confused. A gym membership. It's fully paid for a year, my father boomed, throwing his hands up as if he had just gifted me a Ferrari. No excuses now. Brooklyn time to sweat it out. And then, he laughed. It wasn't a warm chuckle. It was a bark of amusement. A cue. And right on time, the family followed. My uncles laughed. My cousins giggled. Even the neighbors, people I barely knew, let out polite, awkward chuckles. The sound washed over me, hot and humiliating. It was a physical blow. They weren't laughing with me. There was no joke to be in on. They were laughing at the implication. The message was clear. Broadcasted to everyone we knew. Kendra gets a future. Brooklyn gets a hint. Kendra stepped away from the group hug and moved toward me. She smelled of champagne and vanilla. She leaned in close, pretending to admire the card in my hand so the camera would catch us sharing a moment. Her lips brushed my ear. Her voice was low, a whisper meant only for me. Maybe if you worked on yourself, you would get treated like a daughter worth investing in, she hissed. Don't look so sour. It is embarrassing. She pulled back instantly, flashing a bright, camera-ready smile, and patted my arm. Thanks, Dad. This is so great for her. Time seemed to slow down. I looked at the card in my hand, Planet Fitness. Then I looked at the deed in Kendra's hand, Sun Prairie. I looked at my parents. They were watching me with a mixture of delight and challenge. They were waiting for me to snap. They wanted me to yell. They wanted me to throw the card on the ground and scream that it was unfair. They wanted the footage of crazy Brooklyn ruining Kendra's big day, the ungrateful daughter who couldn't take a joke, the jealous sister. It would be the perfect climax to their video, the ultimate proof that they were saints dealing with a sinner. The heat in the garden felt suffocating. My chest tightened, as if a giant hand were squeezing my lungs. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to fight. I wanted to list every bill I had paid myself since I was a teenager. I wanted to scream that I was the only one in this family who actually lived in reality. But then I saw the camera lens, blinking red. I took a deep breath. I let the air out slowly through my nose. I forced my spine to straighten. I did not frown. I did not cry. I did not scream. I looked my father dead in the eye. I didn't smile. But I didn't scowl either. I just looked at him with a profound, terrifying calmness. Thank you, Ray, I said. I didn't call him Dad. It is very clear what this is. The laughter faltered slightly. The crowd wasn't sure how to react to a lack of drama. My father's smile twitched. He hadn't expected dignity. He had paid for a tantrum. Well, good, Ray stammered, trying to regain the rhythm. Use it well. I will, I said softly. I turned to my mother. The party is lovely, Linda, but I have a long drive back to Minneapolis. I think I will head out now. You are leaving. My mother's voice pitched up, sharp and accusing. We haven't even cut the cake. Don't be like this. Brooklyn. Like what? I asked, my voice level. I have received my gift. I have congratulated my sister. I have work in the morning. Thank you for the hospitality. I didn't wait for permission. I turned around and walked away. The silence that followed me was heavier than the applause had been. I could feel their confusion. I was walking off stage in the middle of their play. I heard my aunt whisper something about me being cold, and my father made a loud, boisterous joke to cover the awkwardness. Something about how I couldn't wait to hit the treadmill. But the laughter was thin this time. It didn't stick. I walked through the side gate, my heels clicking on the pavement. I kept my head high until I reached my car. A sensible 4-year-old sedan parked down the street because the driveway was reserved for Kendra's brand new convertible. I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The air inside the car was baking hot, trapped and stale. I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I replayed the sound of that laughter. It looped in my mind, over and over. The way my father's eyes had crinkled with mockery. The way Kendra had looked at me with pure, distilled contempt. They didn't just favor her. They enjoyed hurting me. That was the revelation. It wasn't accidental neglect. It was recreational cruelty. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gym membership card. The plastic was warm from my body heat. I stared at the logo. It is a gym membership, I whispered to the empty car. I tossed the card onto the passenger seat. It landed face up, looking ridiculous and small. I started the engine. The air conditioning blasted hot air for a moment before turning cool. As I pulled away from the curb, leaving the party and the cheering and the perfect family behind, I made a decision. It wasn't a rash decision born of anger. It was cold, hard, and permanent. I was done. No more holidays, no more birthdays. No more answering the phone when Linda called to complain about her friends. No more nodding politely while Ray lectured me on finance. I drove toward the highway, watching the house disappear in my rearview mirror. I was going to change my phone number. I was going to move to a new apartment in Minneapolis where they didn't know the address. I was going to lock every door into my life. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could just drive away and leave their toxicity in Wisconsin. I looked at the gym card again. It sat there like a pathetic little joke. But as I merged onto the interstate, speeding up to 70 miles per hour, I felt a strange sensation. I felt like that card wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was a label they had slapped onto my forehead. The lesser one, the joke, the failure. I wasn't going to just throw it away. I was going to peel that label off, layer by layer, until there was nothing left of the Brooklyn they thought they knew. I didn't know then that the gym membership was the least of my problems. I didn't know that while I was driving away, thinking I was escaping, the real trap had already been set. I thought the laughter was the weapon. I was wrong. The laughter was just the distraction. But in that moment, as the sun began to set over the highway, casting long shadows across the road, I made a vow to myself. I would never let them laugh at me again. I pressed my foot down on the gas pedal, putting miles between me and the people who shared my DNA, unaware that the distance I was trying to create was already being erased by a pen on a piece of paper I had never seen. To the outside world, the Flores family was a fortress of American prosperity. If you looked at our annual Christmas cards, the ones my mother Linda spent 3 months coordinating, you would see a unit so cohesive it bordered on military precision. We wore matching sweaters in shades of burgundy or navy. We stood in front of fireplaces that were roaring with artificial logs, or under trees that were perfectly dusted with snow. My father, Ray, always had his hand on my mother's back. My mother always had her hand on Kendra's arm, and I was always there, usually on the far left or right, smiling the smile of someone who knows they are technically in the picture but not part of the composition. We were the family that sat in the third pew at church every Sunday. We were the family that volunteered at the soup kitchen on Thanksgiving morning. but only for the hour when the local news crew was filming. My father was obsessed with the optics of goodness. He did not care if we were actually happy, as long as we looked happy to the Rotary Club and the Deacon Board. In the Flores household, reputation was the only currency that mattered, and my parents spent it lavishly on maintaining the facade. But inside the house, once the front door was closed and the neighbors could no longer see into the windows, there was a rigid, invisible architecture. It was a hierarchy as old as time, but in our house, it was absolute. Kendra was the protagonist, I was the stagehand. It was a dynamic that had been cemented long before the gym membership incident. I remember when Kendra was 19. She had been driving my father's brand new SUV, a vehicle he treated with more tenderness than he did most human beings. She was texting. Of course. She ran a red light and T-boned a delivery van. The SUV was totaled. The delivery driver was shaken, but okay. I was at the kitchen table studying for a microeconomics final when the call came. I watched my father's face go pale. I expected the explosion. I expected the rage that I would have received if I had so much as scratched the bumper. Instead, when Ray and Linda brought her home, they were cooing at her. Kendra was sobbing, shaking like a leaf, creating a performance of trauma that was truly compelling. "It is okay, baby," my mother soothed, stroking Kendra's hair. "It was an accident. The sun was in your eyes, right?" "It was so bright," Kendra wailed, burying her face in my father's shirt. "We will handle the insurance," Ray said, his voice gentle. "Don't you worry about a thing. We just want you safe." 2 weeks later, Kendra was driving a replacement car, a newer model than the one she had destroyed. There were no consequences, no lectures on responsibility. The narrative was that Kendra was sensitive and fragile, and therefore, she required protection from the harsh edges of the world. Contrast that with my experience 6 months later. I was 20 years old, living in a drafty apartment off campus, working 2 shifts as a waitress to pay my tuition, because my parents said they could only afford to support one child's education fully, and Kendra needed the structure of a dormitory more than I did. I was short on rent by $300 because I had to buy textbooks. I called home. It was a humiliating call to make. I asked for a loan, not a gift, a loan. "Oh, Brooklyn," my mother sighed into the phone, her voice thick with disappointment. "We really thought you had your budget under control." "I do," I explained, staring at the empty fridge in my apartment. "But the textbook prices went up, and I lost 2 shifts because of the flu." "Well," my father's voice chimed in from the background, "this is a learning opportunity, isn't it? If we bail you out, you will never learn to swim. You are the strong one. Brooklyn, you will figure it out. You will figure it out." That was the family motto for me. It sounded like a compliment. They wrapped it in praise. They called me independent, resilient, and tough. But I learned very quickly that "you are so strong" was just code for "we do not care if you drown." It was a brilliant psychological trick. By framing their neglect as a testament to my character, they absolved themselves of guilt. If I complained, I wasn't being a victim. I was failing to be strong. If I pointed out that they paid Kendra's parking tickets while I walked to work in the snow to save gas money, I was being petty and jealous. "Kendra needs more help," my mother would say, looking at me with those wide, innocent eyes. "She doesn't have your constitution. Brooklyn, you should be grateful you were born capable. Don't be selfish." So, I became capable. I had no choice. I built a life out of necessity. I learned to fix my own flat tires. I learned to do my taxes at 18. I learned to negotiate leases and navigate health insurance deductibles. I graduated with honors, not because I was smarter than Kendra, but because I knew there was no safety net waiting to catch me if I fell. I was walking a tightrope over a canyon, while Kendra was playing in a bouncy castle. The graduation party was just the public unveiling of this private truth. The gym membership wasn't a joke to them. It was their way of saying, "Keep running, keep working, keep being the engine while your sister gets to be the passenger." In the days following the party, the silence from my end was absolute. I did not call to yell. I did not send angry texts. I drove back to my apartment in Minneapolis, and I began the process of surgical removal. But before I cut the cord completely, I saw the post. I was scrolling through social media one last time before deactivating my account. There it was. A photo of Kendra standing on the front porch of the house in Sun Prairie. The house my parents bought. The house with the 3 bedrooms and the granite countertops. She was holding a glass of wine, looking off into the distance with a contemplative smile. The sun was setting perfectly behind her, lighting up her hair. The caption read, "New beginnings. So incredibly blessed to have my own home. God is good." Homeowner. Hard work pays off blessed. There was no mention of mom, no mention of dad, no thank you to the bank accounts that had been drained to make this happen, to the casual observer, to her friends, to the guys she dated. It looked like she had achieved this. It looked like she was the success story. My father had liked the photo. My mother had commented, "So proud of you. Baby, you deserve it." They were co-signing the lie. They were helping her build a reality where she was the winner and I was just the sister with the gym membership. That photo was the final scalpel stroke. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt cold. A deep, Arctic cold that settled in my bones. I put my phone down and looked around my apartment. It was small. The furniture was a mix of IKEA and thrift store finds that I had refurbished myself. But it was mine. Every spoon, every towel, every light bulb had been paid for with money I earned. "Okay," I said aloud to the empty room. "If that is how you want to play it." I spent the next 3 days dismantling my digital life. I went to the mobile carrier store and changed my number. I told the clerk I was dealing with stalkers. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was being stalked by my past. I blocked every email address associated with the Flores name. I blocked my aunts, my uncles, and the cousins who had laughed at the party. I requested a transfer at work to a different internal team, just to shift my schedule. I contacted the post office and set up a P.O. box for my mail, so nothing would come directly to my physical address, though I knew my parents didn't have my current address anyway. They had never asked for it. In the 4 years I had lived in Minneapolis, they had never once visited. Minneapolis was only 4 hours away, but to them, it might as well have been Mars. I moved into a new unit in the same building, just 2 floors up, signing a lease that felt like a fresh declaration of independence. It was a 1-bedroom with a view of the city skyline. It was quiet. It was clean. It was fortress-like. For the first time in 32 years, I felt untethered. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety, the worry about what they thought of me, the need to prove I was worthy of their attention simply vanished. It was like a radio that had been blaring static in the corner of the room was finally unplugged. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner for one. I went to the gym, not the one they gave me, but a nice one I paid for myself. I started to sleep through the night. I honestly thought I had won. I thought the victory was in the leaving. I told myself that the best revenge was a life well lived, separate from their toxic orbit. I believed that by removing myself from the equation, I had deprived them of their punching bag. I was naive. I underestimated Ray's obsession with control and Kendra's desperate, bottomless need for resources. I didn't understand that in a system like ours, the scapegoat isn't just a target for abuse. The scapegoat is a load-bearing wall. You can't just remove the wall without the house starting to shake, and the house was shaking. I just couldn't feel the tremors yet. I was enjoying my peace, sipping coffee on my balcony, watching the cars move silently on the highway below. I didn't know that 300 miles away, the blessed homeowner was already drowning. I didn't know that my silence was being interpreted not as an escape, but as an opportunity. They say that when you go no contact with a narcissist, the hardest part is the guilt. But for me, the hardest part was the ignorance. I didn't see the frantic family meetings. I didn't see the panic when the first bills for the Sun Prairie house started rolling in. I didn't see the moment they decided that if I wasn't going to be part of the family physically, I could still be part of it financially. I sat in my quiet apartment, breathing the filtered air of my freedom, completely unaware that my name was already being written on dotted lines in a room I would never step foot in. The calm wasn't an ending. It was just the deep breath the ocean takes before it smashes everything to pieces. For 30 days, I was a ghost in my own life, and it was magnificent. I had settled into a rhythm at Northbridge Data Services that bordered on hypnotic. My cubicle was located in the back corner of the 4th floor, nestled between a ficus plant that was fighting for its life and a server room that hummed with a constant, low-frequency vibration. Most people would have found the noise irritating, but to me, it sounded like safety. It was white noise. It blocked out the world. I arrived at 8 in the morning. I left at 5 in the evening. I spoke to my coworkers only when necessary, offering polite nods near the coffee machine and generic comments about the weather in the elevator. No one knew I had a sister who owned a mortgage-free home in Wisconsin. No one knew my parents had laughed at me while handing me a gym membership. Here, I was just Brooklyn, the quiet analyst who always turned her reports in on time and never caused drama. My apartment in Minneapolis had become a sanctuary. I had unpacked slowly, savoring the feeling of placing books on shelves that no one else would touch. I bought a rug for the living room, a deep charcoal gray that felt soft under my bare feet. I paid my rent on the 1st of the month, watching the money leave my account with a sense of grim satisfaction. It was my money. It bought my silence. I truly believed I had severed the limb. I thought that by changing my phone number and moving to a new unit, I had created a firewall they could not breach. I assumed that their pride would keep them away. After all, they had the golden child and the golden house. Why would they bother with the disappointment? I was naive. I forgot that parasites do not detach simply because the host walks away. They detach only when they are full. And my family was never full. The cracks started to show on a Tuesday night in late July. It was just past 11 o'clock. I was in bed, reading a novel, the city lights casting long, geometric shadows across my duvet. My phone was on the nightstand, charging. It was a new phone, a new plan, a number known only to my HR department, my landlord, and my dentist. When it rang, the sound was so unexpected that I dropped my book. I stared at the screen. It was an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. 608. Madison. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reasoned with myself that it could be a wrong number. It could be a telemarketer spoofing a local line. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again immediately. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but fear is a better motivator. If they had this number, something was wrong. Something was catastrophic. I picked up the phone but said nothing. I just held it to my ear, listening to the silence on the other end. Waiting. Brooklyn. The voice was unrecognizable at first. It was high-pitched, jagged, and wet with tears. It took me a second to realize it was Kendra. "Brooklyn, please don't hang up," she sobbed. "Please, I don't know who else to call." I sat up, pulling the blanket tight around my shoulders. The queen bee tone was gone. The smugness she had worn at the graduation party like a designer coat had been stripped away. She sounded like a child who had broken a vase and was trying to hide the pieces before Mom got home. "How did you get this number?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hand was gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. "I found it in Dad's old contact backup for his email. I don't know. It synced. I just hit try," she rambled, making no sense. "Brooklyn, I am in so much trouble." "You have a house," I said, cold and factual. "You have a degree. You are blessed. Remember what kind of trouble could you possibly be in?" "The house," she choked out. "The house is eating me alive." I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to fill it. "It is not just the house," she confessed, her words tumbling out over each other. "It is the money. Mom and Dad said no mortgage, and that was true. But they didn't tell me about the rest. The property taxes came last week. Brooklyn, it is $6,000. I don't have $6,000. "Get a job," I said. "You graduated." "I am looking," she wailed. "But entry level doesn't pay enough, and I have to pay the insurance. And then the HOA sent me a letter. The HOA. I tried to make money, she sniffed. I thought, it is a big house, right? I am only one person. So I listed the downstairs on a short-term rental site, and I threw a kickoff party to get good reviews. A few friends came over, maybe 50 people. I closed my eyes. 50 people in a Sun Prairie subdivision on a weeknight. The neighbors called the police, she whispered. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. They fined me $2,000 for unauthorized commercial use and noise violations. They said they would put a lien on the property if I didn't pay in 30 days. So pay it, I said. Ask Mom and Dad. I can't. Her voice rose to a shriek. I already asked them for money to fix the roof. There was a leak in the master bedroom the second week I moved in. The inspector missed it. That cost $4,000. Dad gave me the money, but he was weird about it. He said things were tight right now. If I tell him about the fines and the taxes, he will know I messed up. He will know I am not capable. I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. So you want me to pay it? No. I just need a loan, she pleaded. Just until I get a job, or maybe you could just talk to them. They listen to you when it comes to money. You could tell them it is normal for taxes to be this high. You could explain it so they don't get mad at me. I am not doing this. Kendra, I said, I am not your buffer anymore. You wanted the house. You got the house. Welcome to home ownership. I hung up. I turned the phone off completely and threw it onto the foot of the bed. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling. My heart was still racing, but my mind was clear. She was failing. The golden gift was actually a white elephant, a burden she couldn't carry. I slept fitfully, dreaming of sinking ships and heavy envelopes. The next morning, the assault continued. I was at my desk at Northbridge, staring at a spreadsheet, when the receptionist messaged me, "Call on line 2. Says it is your father. He says it is an emergency." I froze. They had called my work. They had bypassed my cell phone and gone straight to the one place I couldn't ignore them without looking unprofessional. I picked up the handset. "This is Brooklyn." "Brooklyn, honey." My mother's voice floated through the line. It was soft, buttery, the tone she used when she wanted to convince a cashier to accept an expired coupon. "We have been so worried about you. You just vanished." "I am at work, Linda," I said. "Is there an emergency? Did someone die?" "Don't be morbid," my father's voice boomed in on the conference line. "We are calling about your sister. She told us she spoke to you last night." Of course she did. She had panicked and thrown me under the bus immediately. "She called me," I corrected. "I didn't call her." "She is in a bit of a tight spot," Ray said, his voice dropping into that reasonable, man-of-the-world register he loved. "Just some cash flow issues, growing pains. You know how it is." "I know how it is to pay my own bills," I said. "I don't know how it is to be given a free house and still fail." "Watch your tone," Ray snapped, the mask slipping for a millisecond. Then he recovered. "Look, we are a family. Family helps family. That is the bottom line. We have extended ourselves quite a bit to get her settled. The market has been tricky for my business this quarter." This was new. Ray never admitted to financial weakness. "So you are broke?" I asked bluntly. "We are illiquid," he corrected sharply. "There is a difference. We need to bridge the gap for Kendra's taxes and this little misunderstanding with the Homeowners Association. We were thinking, since you are doing so well and we know you are, Brooklyn, we are so proud of your independence that you could step in." "Step in how?" "We need a cosigner," my mother said quickly. "Just for a small line of credit against the equity, just to smooth things over. Or, if you have some savings, a direct transfer would be faster. We would pay you back with interest, of course." They didn't want a favor. They wanted a financier. They had tapped themselves out buying the house to show off to the neighbors. And now that the reality of maintenance costs had hit, they wanted the gym membership daughter to pay for the mansion daughter's mistakes. "No," I said. "Brooklyn," my father warned, "don't be spiteful. You are punishing your sister because you are jealous." "I am not jealous," I said. keeping my voice low so my coworkers wouldn't hear. I am prudent. You told me to figure things out on my own. I did. Now let her do the same. It is just a signature. My mother cried. It costs you nothing to sign a piece of paper. Brooklyn, why do you have to be so difficult? I have to get back to work, I said. Do not call this number again. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking. I felt sick. It wasn't just anger. It was the familiarity of it. When they needed me, I was part of the family. When I needed them, I was a burden. I left work early that day. I couldn't focus. The numbers on the screen kept blurring together. I felt exposed, like the walls of my cubicle had turned to glass. I drove home, taking a different route than usual, checking my rearview mirror every few blocks. Paranoia was starting to seep in. If they had my new cell number, and they had my work number, what else did they have? I got back to my apartment building around 4 in the afternoon. I walked into the lobby, checked my mailbox empty, thank God, and took the elevator up to the 6th floor. I locked the door behind me, threw my keys on the counter, and went straight to the shower. I needed to wash the conversation off my skin. I stood under the scalding water for 20 minutes, trying to scrub away the sound of my mother's pleading voice. By 7 o'clock, I had calmed down. I made a simple dinner grilled cheese and tomato soup and sat on my couch to watch a documentary. I told myself it was over. I had said no. They had no power here. Minnesota was a different state. Their jurisdiction ended at the Wisconsin border. Then, at 7:30, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the heavy pound of a delivery driver. It was a hesitant, rhythmic rapping. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I didn't have friends over. I didn't order food. I stood up slowly, setting my plate on the coffee table. I walked to the door in my socks, making no sound. The hallway outside was quiet. I leaned forward and pressed my eye to the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the image, curving the hallway walls. But the figure standing there was unmistakable. It was Kendra. She was wearing a hoodie that was too big for her and yoga pants. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked small, defeated, and terrifyingly real. She was standing on my welcome mat, in Minneapolis, at the apartment I had never told them about, the apartment I had moved into specifically to hide from them. I stopped breathing. The air in my lungs turned to lead. How did she know I lived in Unit 604? How did she get into the building? You needed a key fob to operate the elevator. You needed a code to open the front door. Kendra raised her hand and knocked again. Tap, tap, tap. Brooklyn, she whispered, leaning her forehead against the wood of my door. I know you are in there. I saw your car in the garage. Please open up. She had been watching. She had been waiting in the garage. My mind raced back to the phone call with my father. Family helps family. It wasn't a request. It was a threat. They hadn't just looked up my number. They had hunted me. I backed away from the door. My heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't open it. I didn't say a word. But as I stared at the door, watching the shadow of her feet shift under the gap, I realized something that made my blood run cold. They hadn't just found me, to find me this fast, to know my car, my garage spot, my unit number. They had to have access to my records, not just public records, private ones. My sanctuary wasn't just breached, it had been occupied long before she knocked. Kendra knocked one more time, louder now, a hint of desperation in the sound. I am not leaving. Brooklyn, she said through the door. I have nowhere else to go. I looked at the deadbolt. It was locked. But for the first time, the lock looked like a toy. It kept people out, but it couldn't keep out whatever they had already done to my life. I stood in the center of my living room, trapped in the home I paid for, while my sister stood outside, ready to drag the chaos of her gift right into my sanctuary. The distance I had driven, the miles I had put between us, the silence I had cultivated, it was all an illusion. They were already here, and they had brought the bill with them. I stood on the other side of the door, my hand hovering over the deadbolt, caught in a paralysis of indecision. Outside, in the hallway, Kendra sniffled loudly. It was a wet, pathetic sound designed to elicit sympathy, a sound I had heard 1,000 times growing up whenever she wanted to avoid a chore or a consequence. But beneath the pathetic performance, there was a threat. If I did not open this door, she would not just leave, she would escalate, she would pound on the wood, she would scream. She would drag the chaos of the Flores family right into the pristine to quiet hallway of my building, and my neighbors, the lawyer in 602, the elderly couple in 605, would open their doors to see the spectacle. I could not handle the spectacle. That was my weakness, and she knew it. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click echoed in the silence of the apartment like a gunshot. I opened the door just wide enough to block the entrance with my body. Kendra stood there, looking like a refugee from a high-end fashion disaster. Her mascara was smeared in artistic streaks down her cheeks. Her hands were trembling, clutching a designer handbag that probably cost more than my first car. "One night," I said. My voice was low, flat, and hard as granite. "You can stay for exactly one night because I do not want you sleeping in the garage and causing a scene with building security. You sleep on the couch. You do not touch my things. You leave by 8 in the morning when I go to work." Kendra nodded frantically, her eyes wide and watery. "Thank you, Brooklyn. Oh my God. Thank you. I didn't know where else to go." She pushed past me before I could step aside, bringing with her a gust of cold air and the scent of stale perfume and panic. As soon as she was inside, the trembling stopped. It was subtle, but I saw it. Her shoulders relaxed. Her eyes, which had been darting around wildly in the hallway, suddenly steadied. She wasn't looking at me with gratitude. She was scanning my apartment. She looked at the charcoal rug, the wall-mounted television, the bookshelf organized by color. She was appraising the value of my life. "It is smaller than I thought," she murmured, dropping her bag onto my clean kitchen counter. "It is paid for," I replied, locking the door behind us. I felt a sudden urge to add a second lock. Maybe a chain. Maybe a steel bar. "Do not put your bag on the counter. It is dirty." She rolled her eyes, a flash of the old Kendra breaking through the veneer of the victim. "God, you are still so uptight. I am having the worst week of my life, and you are worried about germs." She moved her bag to the floor, but the intrusion had already begun. The air in the apartment felt heavier, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I am starving," she announced. She didn't ask if I had food. She walked straight to the refrigerator and pulled it open. I stood in the living room, watching her. "Kendra, that is my food for the week. I meal prep. I just need a snack," she said, her voice muffled by the fridge door. She pulled out a container of quinoa salad I had made for lunch the next day. She grabbed a fork from the drying rack, my fork, and started eating directly from the Tupperware. "This is dry," she criticized, chewing with her mouth slightly open. "You need to add more lemon." I felt a vein throb in my temple. It wasn't about the salad. It was the entitlement. She had broken into my sanctuary, and within 5 minutes, she was critiquing the hospitality she had forced me to provide. "Finish it," I said. "Then take a shower if you need to. I will get you a blanket, but do not go into my bedroom. That is off limits." She looked at me, a forkful of quinoa halfway to her mouth. There was a strange glint in her eye, something calculating. "You have a lot of rules for a sister. I have boundaries for a stranger," I corrected. "And right now, that is what you are." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "We are not strangers. Brooklyn, we share blood. You can't scrub that out, no matter how far you move." I turned away to get the linens from the hallway closet. My hands were shaking. I tossed a pillow and a duvet onto the gray sofa. "Shower," I ordered. "Then sleep. I have to work." Kendra finished the salad, left the empty container on the coffee table, not the sink, the table, and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the water turn on. I sat on the edge of my armchair, listening. I heard the cabinet door open. I stood up and walked to the bathroom door. "What are you looking for?" I called out. "Just toothpaste," she yelled back. But when she came out 20 minutes later, she wasn't just clean. She smelled like my rosemary and mint body wash. Her hair was damp and smelled like my expensive deep conditioning mask, the one I saved for Sundays. She was wearing one of my oversized t-shirts that she must have taken from the laundry hamper because I certainly hadn't given it to her. She had colonized my bathroom. She walked into the living room, rubbing her hair with my towel. She looked at me, and for a second, she looked almost triumphant. "Your water pressure is terrible," she said. "The house in Sun Prairie has a rainfall showerhead. It is amazing. You should come see it sometime." "I am good," I said. "Lights out?" I went into my bedroom and shut the door. I didn't just shut it, I locked it. It was a flimsy interior privacy lock, the kind you can pop open with a paperclip. But it was the only barrier I had. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. I could hear her moving around in the living room. The floorboards creaked. I heard the refrigerator open again. I heard the soft zip of a bag opening. What was she doing? At around 2 a.m, I needed water. I debated staying in my room and suffering through the thirst. But my anger outweighed my caution. This was my apartment. I unlocked my door and walked out. The living room was dark, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the blinds. Kendra was asleep on the couch, tangled in the duvet. I walked to the kitchen. On the counter, near where she had left her bag earlier, was a stack of mail. I froze. I usually kept my mail in a small organizer by the door. I had checked it yesterday. I remembered seeing a few envelopes, a utility bill, a credit card offer, and a statement from my bank. The organizer was empty. The mail was now in a neat pile next to Kendra's purse. I walked over and picked up the stack. The envelopes had been opened, not torn open, but carefully slit along the top, as if with a letter opener or a sharp fingernail. My bank statement, my cell phone bill, a letter from my insurance company. I felt a cold flush of adrenaline wash over me. I turned to the couch. Kendra was shifting, her breathing even. "Kendra," I said sharply. She didn't stir. I walked over and shook her shoulder. "Kendra, wake up." She groaned and rolled over, blinking up at me in the darkness. What time is it?" "Why did you open my mail?" I held the envelopes up. "Why is my mail on the counter?" She sat up, rubbing her eyes, feigning grogginess. I brought it up." "Brought it up from where?" "From the boxes downstairs." She yawned. "I saw the mailman when I was waiting for you to come home. I thought I would be helpful. The box was jammed, so I just grabbed it." "You don't have a key to my mailbox," I said. "How did you get into my mailbox?" She paused. The grogginess vanished for a split second. "It was unlocked. You must have left it open." "I never leave it open." "Well, it was open." "Brooklyn," she snapped, defensive now. "I was trying to do you a favor. I didn't steal anything. God, you are so paranoid." "And why are they opened?" I demanded. "Why are the envelopes slit?" I dropped them," she stammered. "I thought maybe something fell out. I was checking to make sure it was all there. I didn't read them. Boring numbers. Who cares?" She lay back down and pulled the duvet over her head. "Go to sleep. You are crazy." I stood there, clutching the violated envelopes. She was lying. The mailboxes in the lobby were heavy steel. You couldn't just grab mail out of them unless the lock was broken or you had a key. And the envelopes weren't torn from a drop. They were sliced. I took the mail into my bedroom. I shoved a chair under the doorknob. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, listening. The silence of the apartment felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. At 3:13 in the morning, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. It came from the laundry room, a small closet off the kitchen with a narrow window that faced the fire escape. Click, scrape. It was the sound of a latch being tested. I stopped breathing. I sat perfectly still. Scrape. Someone was trying to slide the window up. I knew Kendra was on the couch. I could hear her soft snoring. So who was at the window? I grabbed my phone, ready to dial 911. I crept to my bedroom door and listened. The sound stopped. Then, I heard a soft tapping on the glass. Not a knock, a signal. And then, From the living room. The snoring stopped. I heard the rustle of the duvet. I heard footsteps soft, padded footsteps moving across the floor, not toward the bathroom, toward the kitchen, toward the laundry room. "Kendra," I called out, my voice loud and shaking. The footsteps stopped instantly. "I am getting water," she yelled back. Her voice was too loud, too awake. "Stay away from the window," I shouted. "What window I am at the sink? Go back to sleep." I didn't go back to sleep. I turned on the light in my room and sat there, phone in hand, until the sun came up. I waited for the glass to shatter. I waited for men in ski masks. I waited for the inevitable violence that my family seemed to attract. But nothing happened. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. At 6 a.m, I finally worked up the courage to leave my room. I unlocked the door and pushed the chair away. The living room was empty. The duvet was folded neatly on the couch, a gesture of politeness that felt mocking. The front door was unlocked. Kendra was gone. I walked to the kitchen. My mail was still in my room where I had hidden it, but when I looked at the fridge, I noticed something. A magnet that held my grocery list had been moved. Underneath it was a note, scrawled on the back of a napkin in Kendra's loopy, childish handwriting. "Thanks for the crash pad. Don't worry about the money. I will figure it out. I will be in touch." I stared at the note. "I will be in touch." It sounded like a threat from a bill collector. I walked to the laundry room. I needed to know. I pushed the folding door open. The washer and dryer stood silent. I looked at the window. It was closed. But when I looked closer, at the sill, I saw it. Dust. There was a thick layer of dust on the sill, except for two distinct spots. Two small, clean circles where someone had pressed their fingers against the glass from the outside, trying to lift it, and on the latch inside, the dust was smudged. Someone had tried to open it from the outside, and someone Kendra had been standing right there on the inside when I called out. She hadn't just been sleeping. She had been waiting to let something in. Or maybe she was just testing the perimeter, checking the vulnerabilities, seeing how hard it would be to crack my life open like a walnut. I walked to the front door and locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I dragged a heavy dining chair and wedged it under the handle. I turned around and looked at my apartment. It didn't look like mine anymore. The air felt contaminated. She had been here for less than 12 hours, but she had left a stain. She had eaten my food, used my soap, opened my mail, and coordinated with someone on my fire escape. She had said, "You can change the locks, but it doesn't matter." I remembered when she said it. It was right before she went to sleep. I had told her I would change the codes if she ever came back. She had smiled, a sleepy, druggy smile. You can change the locks, change the codes, build a wall, but we know who you are. Changing the locks is useless when we have the keys to the history." I shivered. I went to the bathroom to wash my face, to try and wake up from this nightmare. I reached for my toothbrush. It was wet. I stared at it. I hadn't brushed my teeth since last night. It should be bone dry. She had used my toothbrush. It was a small, petty, disgusting violation. But it hit me harder than the window. It was intimate. It was a claim. What is yours is mine. Your house, your money, your hygiene, your identity. I threw the toothbrush into the trash can. I wasn't dealing with a sister who was bad with money. I was dealing with an invasion. And looking at the empty spot where my bank statement used to be, I realized the invasion wasn't just physical. They were already in the system. After the incident with the toothbrush and the smudged window latch, I did not sleep. I spent the next 24 hours turning my apartment into a fortress. I went to a hardware store 3 towns over, just in case anyone was tracking my credit card transactions near my home, and bought a high-definition video doorbell. I did not mount it outside where the building management might complain. I mounted it on the inside of my door frame, angled through the peephole, but I knew the door was not the weak point. The weak point was the fire escape. I took an old smartphone I had kept in a drawer, wiped its memory, and downloaded a surveillance app that triggered on motion. I hid it on top of the kitchen cabinets, nestled behind a decorative ceramic vase. The lens had a perfect commanding view of the laundry room door and the kitchen counter where I kept my admin drawer, the place where I stored my passport, my social security card, and my tax returns. I felt ridiculous doing it. I felt like a conspiracy theorist. I told myself I was overreacting, that Kendra was just a spoiled brat who wanted a free couch, not a criminal mastermind. I was wrong. For 2 nights, nothing happened. The phone recorded nothing but the shifting shadows of clouds passing over the moon. I started to think maybe I had scared her off. Then came the 3rd night. It was exactly 2:11 in the morning. My phone, the one on my nightstand, buzzed. It was a silent notification from the surveillance app. Motion detected kitchen. I did not jump out of bed. I did not scream. I lay perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and I opened the app. The video feed was in grainy black and white, but the image was crisp. The laundry room door, which I had closed before bed, was slowly creaking open. A figure slid out from the darkness of the utility closet. It was Kendra. She was wearing black leggings and a dark hoodie, looking like a caricature of a cat burglar. She moved with a silence that was terrifying. She did not bump into the table. She did not scuff her feet. She moved like she had rehearsed this. I watched, paralyzed, as she crept toward the living room. I expected her to curl up on the couch. I expected her to raid the fridge again. She did neither. She walked straight to the kitchen counter. She pulled a small flashlight from her pocket, a pen light, the kind doctors use, and held it in her mouth. Then, she opened my admin drawer. My stomach dropped. This was not a sister looking for shelter. This was a raid, on the screen. I watched her flip through my file folders with efficient, practiced hands. She ignored the folder labeled warranties. She ignored the takeout menus. She went straight to the back. She pulled out my tax return from last year. She placed it on the counter. She took out her own phone. Click. She took a photo of the first page. Click. She took a photo of the second page. Then she found my birth certificate. Click. Then she found a pay stub I had left in a stack of papers. Click. She put everything back exactly where she found it. She smoothed out the papers. She closed the drawer with such gentle precision that the microphone on the camera didn't even pick up the sound of the rollers. Only after she had secured the digital loot did she move to the living room. She pulled the throw rug over herself, curled up on the floor, not the couch, but the floor, so she wouldn't be seen from the hallway if I walked out and went to sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the screen, watching the rise and fall of her chest. I felt a nausea so profound I almost threw up. She wasn't just using me, she was harvesting me. I waited until 7 in the morning. I got dressed in my work clothes, a suit, armor for the day. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee. The smell of brewing coffee filled the apartment. Kendra stirred on the rug. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and when she saw me standing there, she jumped. "Brooklyn," she gasped, scrambling to her feet. I can explain." "How did you get in?" I asked. My voice was conversational, light. "The door." She lied instantly. The lie came out of her mouth as easily as carbon dioxide. "You must have left it unlocked again. I was scared. Brooklyn, I came back. I didn't want to wake you." "The door was deadbolted," I said. "And I had a chair under the handle." "Maybe you thought you locked it," she said, her voice rising, trying to gaslight me in my own kitchen. "You have been so stressed lately. People forget things." "I don't forget things," I said. "And I don't forget to lock the window in the laundry room." Her face went pale. "I didn't come in the window. That is dangerous." "You are right," I said. "It is dangerous, especially when there is a camera." I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. I turned the volume up. I held it out to her. The video played, the black and white footage of her sliding out of the laundry room, the flashlight, the drawer, the photos. Kendra stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me, and for the first time in her life, she looked cornered. Then, she burst into tears. It was a sudden, violent explosion of sobbing. She collapsed onto the floor, burying her face in her hands. "I am so ashamed," she wailed. I am so sorry. Brooklyn, I didn't know what to do. Why were you photographing my tax returns? I asked. I didn't step forward to comfort her. I stood my ground. I wasn't, she choked out. I was just looking. I wanted to see how you did it, how you manage your money. I wanted to learn. I am so stupid. You took photos of my social security number to learn? I asked. Do not lie to me, Kendra. You are stealing my information. No. She grabbed the hem of my pants, her grip tight. I would never, Mom and Dad are pressuring me so hard. They want to know why I can't be like you. I just wanted to see what you make. I wanted to see if I could, I don't know, maybe ask you for help if I knew you had enough. So you broke into my house to audit me. I am desperate, she screamed. I am sleeping in my car. I haven't showered in 2 days except for when I was here. Do not tell them. Brooklyn, please, if Ray finds out I'm homeless, he will kill me. He will take the house back. He will tell everyone I am a failure. She was sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating. Please, I am your sister. I am scared. Just let me stay. I won't touch anything again. I swear. I looked down at her. A part of me, the part that had been trained since birth to protect her, wanted to kneel down. I wanted to say it was okay. I wanted to fix it. But then I looked at the counter where she had laid out my identity like a buffet. You have 1 hour, I said. The sobbing stopped abruptly. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. What? You have 1 hour to gather your things and get out, I said. If you are not gone by 8:15, I am calling the police, and I'm showing them this video. You wouldn't, she whispered. I am your family. You are a burglar, I said. Get out. I went to my room and locked the door. I listened to her pack. She wasn't crying anymore. She was slamming things. She kicked the wall. She muttered words that would have made a sailor blush. When I heard the front door slam, I walked out. The apartment was empty. I didn't go to work. I called a locksmith. I paid $300 for an emergency visit to install a high-security deadbolt and a bar lock for the laundry window. Then I went to the leasing office. I showed the property manager the video, just the part where she entered through the window. This person is not allowed on the premises, I told him. If she is seen in the garage or the lobby, I want the police called immediately for trespassing. The manager, a stern man named David, looked at the footage and nodded grimly. Consider it done. Ms. Flores, we take security very seriously. I thought I had secured the perimeter. I thought I had plugged the leak. But by noon, the second wave hit. My phone started ringing. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my Aunt Susan. Then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Finally, I answered my father's call. I put it on speaker and set it on the table, recording the conversation on my backup phone. You are a monster, Ray said. There was no greeting, no hello. Hello, Ray, I said. Your sister just called us, he spat. She is hysterical. She said she came to you for help. She came to you on her knees, begging for a place to sleep because she was having a panic attack, and you threw her out on the street. She broke into my apartment, I said. She climbed through a window. She lost her keys, my mother yelled from the background. She told us. She lost her keys, and she knew you were home, but you wouldn't answer the door because you are so cruel. So she had to climb in. She could have fallen. She could have died. Brooklyn. And you treat her like a criminal. She is a criminal, I said. She went through my financial documents. Oh, stop it, Ray scoffed. She was looking for a piece of paper to write a note on. She told us, you are twisting everything to make yourself look like the victim. You have always been this way. Jealous, petty. I have video, I said. I don't care what you have. Ray roared. I care that my daughter is crying in a parking lot because her own sister is too selfish to let her sleep on a couch. You have a nice apartment. Brooklyn, you have plenty of room. But no, you have to hoard it. You have to make her suffer because we gave her a house and we gave you a gym membership. That is what this is about, isn't it? You are punishing her for our gift. I am protecting myself, I said. You are ungrateful, Linda sobbed. We raised you better than this. We are done asking. Brooklyn, you need to apologize to her. You need to let her back in. Tonight. No, I said. And if she comes back, she is going to jail. If you arrest your sister, Ray said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You will not have a family. I think I made peace with that a long time ago, I said. I hung up. I blocked their numbers. Again. But the smear campaign had already started. By 2 in the afternoon, my Facebook feed, which I had reactivated briefly just to check, was blowing up. My Aunt Susan had posted a long, vague prayer request about ungrateful children and family members who turn their backs on blood. My cousins were leaving angry comments. They were painting a picture of me as a bitter, successful elitist who was kicking her struggling, sweet sister while she was down. I sat in my apartment, the new locks gleaming on the door, feeling completely isolated. They had turned the narrative so effectively that even I was starting to question my sanity. Was I too hard? Was she just looking for paper then, at 4:30? My phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I thought it was another flying monkey from the Flores Circus, but the caller ID said Aunt Nora. Nora was my father's younger sister. She was the one the family rarely talked about. She lived in Chicago, smoked cigarillos, and had been divorced 3 times. She didn't come to Thanksgiving. She didn't pretend to be perfect. I picked up. Hello, Nora. Brooklyn, she said. Her voice was raspy, like sandpaper over gravel. I saw Susan's post. I heard the family gossip mill spinning. Ray is telling everyone you assaulted Kendra. I didn't touch her, I said, exhausted. She broke in. I believe you, Nora said. I paused. You do? I know my brother, she said. And I know that little actress he raised. Listen to me. Kid, I am not calling to give you a hug. I am calling to give you a heads up. About what? I have a friend who works in the county clerk's office in Dane County, Nora said. I asked her to pull the records on that house in Sun Prairie. I wanted to see how Ray afforded it. He has been borrowing money from everyone I know for years. He said he bought it cash, I said. No mortgage? Yeah, about that, Nora said. There was the sound of a lighter flicking, then a long exhale. The deed was recorded, sure. But there is something weird about the title history, and there is a second document attached to the closing packet. What document? I don't know yet, she said. But my friend said the names on the financing paperwork don't match the names on the deed. And Brooklyn, yes. The house might not be in Kendra's name, she said. Or at least, not only Kendra's name. Ray has a history of using creative financing. What are you saying? I asked, gripping the phone. I am saying that if Kendra was photographing your tax returns and your ID, she wasn't doing it for a vision board, Nora said darkly. She was shopping, and if I were you, I would check your credit report, today, because that house in Sun Prairie, I don't think it was a gift. I think it was a setup. I felt the blood drain from my face. The pieces, the gym membership, the laughter, the family helps family speech, the break-in, the desperate need for my financial data suddenly clicked into a pattern that was far more sinister than simple jealousy. Thanks, Nora, I whispered. Don't thank me, she said. Layer up, kid. A storm is coming. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. I looked at the spot on the counter where Kendra had laid out my life, and I realized with a sickening clarity the gym membership wasn't the insult. It was the distraction. While I was busy being offended, they were busy stealing something much more valuable than my pride. 3 weeks after the gym membership incident, and 2 days after I installed the high-security deadbolt, the war shifted fronts. It moved from the physical realm of window latches and intruders to the silent, devastating battlefield of paper. It was a Tuesday morning. The air conditioning in the Northbridge Data Services office was humming its usual Arctic tune. I was standing at the copy machine, waiting for a quarterly report to print, when the mail cart rattled down the hallway. The mail clerk, a young guy named Kevin who usually wore headphones, stopped at my cubicle. "Special delivery for you, Brooklyn," he said, tossing a thick white envelope onto my desk. "Looks official. It came via certified courier to the front desk, but they signed for it." I frowned. I never got personal mail at work. My clients were internal. They sent emails, not couriers. I walked back to my desk and picked it up. The return address was for Sovereign Lending Solutions, a bank I had never banked with. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware, but my name was typed clearly on the front Brooklyn Flores. Not just my name, but my full legal name, including my middle name, which I rarely used. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. I didn't open it at my desk. I took it to the break room, which was empty at 10 in the morning. I used a plastic stirrer to slice open the top. Inside was a single sheet of paper, tri-folded, with a red banner across the top that read, "Second Notice of Default." I stared at the words, but my brain refused to process them. Default. I had a credit score of 810. I paid my credit card bill in full every Friday. I didn't have debts. I forced my eyes to scan down the page. "Dear Ms. Flores, this letter serves as a formal notification that your home equity line of credit HELOC account ending in 4492 is 60 days past due. The total amount currently due to bring the account current is $4,218.16. My hands started to shake. I had never opened a home equity line of credit. I didn't own a home to have equity in. I read further. Collateral property 422 Maple Drive, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. The world tilted on its axis. The break room floor seemed to drop away. That was the address. That was Kendra's house, the gift, the mortgage-free sanctuary my parents had bestowed upon their golden child while the cameras rolled. I sat down on one of the cheap plastic chairs because my knees had suddenly turned to water. 60 days past due. That meant the loan had been opened at least 2 months ago, before the graduation party, before the gift was even announced. There was a customer service number at the bottom of the page. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I mistyped the number twice. "Sovereign Lending. This is Mark speaking." A bored voice answered after 3 rings. "This is Brooklyn Flores," I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow, and metallic. "I just received a default notice at my place of employment. There must be a mistake. I do not have a loan with you." "One moment, please. Let me pull up the file." I heard the click-clack of a keyboard. The silence stretched for an eternity. "Okay, Ms. Flores," Mark said, his tone shifting from bored to professional. "I have the file here. I am showing a home equity line of credit in the amount of $150,000, secured against the property at 422 Maple Drive." $150,000, I repeated, my voice rising. "I didn't authorize that. I don't own that house." "Well, according to our records, you are the primary guarantor." Mark said, "The loan was originated 3 months ago. We have your social security number, your date of birth, and your signature on the closing documents." "Who is the other borrower?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The primary borrower is listed as Ray Flores," Mark said. "And there is a Kendra Flores listed on the deed, but the financing is secured by Ray Flores and Brooklyn Flores." I closed my eyes. "Mark," I said, trying to keep the hysteria out of my voice, "I did not sign those papers. This is fraud. You need to flag this account immediately." "I can put a note on the file, ma'am," Mark said, sounding skeptical. "But we have a notarized signature, and the funds were dispersed to a joint account. If you are claiming fraud, you will need to file a police report and send us the case number. Until then, the clock is ticking. If this isn't paid by the 15th, it goes to collections, and we will begin foreclosure proceedings on the asset, and it will show as a severe delinquency on your credit report." "It is already past due," I whispered. "Yes, ma'am. It has already been reported to the bureaus." I hung up. I didn't go back to my desk. I went straight to the bathroom and locked myself in the handicap stall. I sat on the toilet lid, clutching the phone, I needed to see it. I needed to see the damage. I logged into the credit monitoring app I hadn't checked in 6 months because I was so confident in my financial health. The screen loaded. A bright red arrow pointed down. My score, which had been a pristine 810, had plummeted to 640. There were 3 new inquiries in the last 90 days. There was the sovereign lending account, showing a balance of $150,000 fully maxed out, and there was another account, a credit card with a $20,000 limit, opened in my name 45 days ago. It was maxed out too. $170,000 of debt. In my name, I felt like I was going to throw up. The sheer scale of it was suffocating. This wasn't just Kendra buying a few dresses with a stolen card. This was a systematic dismantling of my financial future. And then, the memory of the party hit me like a physical blow. I remembered standing on the lawn. I remembered the envelope my father held. It is a gym membership. I remembered the laughter. Suddenly, the cruelty wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. They knew. When they handed me that gym membership, they had already signed my name to a $150,000 loan. They knew that eventually, this day would come. They knew I would find out, and they had planted the seed. By giving me a cheap gift and making me look pathetic, they had created a narrative. If I complained later, if I screamed about money, the family would remember that day. They would think, oh, Brooklyn is just jealous because Kendra got a house and she got a gym pass. She is bitter. She is making things up to get back at them. The gym membership was a prop. It was designed to make me look small, so that when I tried to fight a giant fraud, no one would believe me. It was evil. It was brilliant. Calculated evil. I stood up. I flushed the toilet just to make noise, washed my hands with scalding hot water, and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were dry. I was done crying. Crying was for people who still had hope that their parents loved them. I didn't have parents anymore. I had adversaries. I walked back to my desk. I didn't do any work for Northbridge Data Services that afternoon. I worked for Brooklyn Flores. First, I executed a credit freeze on all 3 major bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. It took me 40 minutes to navigate the websites, setting up PIN codes that only I knew. This would stop them from opening any new accounts. It wouldn't fix the old ones, but it would stop the bleeding. Second, I changed every password I owned: my email, my bank, my retirement account, my health insurance portal. I used a random password generator to create strings of 40 characters that looked like computer code. Third, I went to the Dane County Register of Deeds website. Public records are a beautiful, terrible thing. In Wisconsin, land records are open to the public. You just need a name or an address. I typed in 422, Maple Drive, Sun Prairie. The search results populated instantly. There was the warranty deed, dated 3 months ago, grantor, the previous owners, grantee Kendra Flores. But underneath that was the mortgage document and the home equity line of credit agreement. I paid the $5 fee to download the full PDF package. The file opened on my dual monitors. I scrolled past the legal jargon, past the property descriptions, down to the signature page. And there I was, Brooklyn Marie Flores. The signature was in blue ink. It looped perfectly. The B had the specific sharp angle at the top that I had used since high school. The Y tailed off with a little flourish. It was my signature, except it wasn't. I leaned in closer, zooming in until the pixels started to blur. It was too perfect. It looked exactly like the signature on my driver's license, the one my father had helped me get when I was 16. It didn't have the slight rush or the micro tremors of a pen moving across paper in real time. It looked practiced. It looked traced. I looked at the date next to the signature, May 12th. On May 12th, I was in Minneapolis. I was at a mandatory all-day training seminar for Northbridge. I had swiped my badge to get into the building at 8 in the morning and swiped out at 5. I had witnesses. I had digital logs. I was 300 miles away from the notary public in Madison who had stamped this document. I looked at the notary stamp. Sarah Jenkins. Commission expires 2026. The stamp was from a pack and ship store on East Washington Avenue in Madison, a store my father used for his business shipping, a store where he probably knew the owner. I sat back in my chair. The office noise, the ringing phones. The chatter faded into a dull roar. They had stolen my identity to buy the house they claimed was a gift. They had maxed out the credit immediately, likely to pay for the renovations or maybe just to pocket the cash, leaving me on the hook for the debt. And then, when the bills came due and they couldn't pay, they tried to guilt me into helping my sister, hoping I would just give them cash without checking my credit report. If I had given Kendra the money for the taxes, they would have used it to pay the interest on the fraud loan. Keeping the scheme alive for another month, I printed the documents, all 50 pages. I took a red marker from my drawer. I circled my name. I circled the date. I circled the notary stamp. Then I took a piece of company letterhead and wrote a timeline. May 12th. Fraudulent signing, June 15th. Graduation party. The distraction, July 20th. Kendra's break-in. Attempt to steal current tax docs to justify the fraud if audited. Today, the default notice. It was a timeline of betrayal. I put the papers into a folder. I put the folder into my bag. I looked at the clock. It was 3 p.m. I stood up and walked to my manager's office. "Janet," I said, "I have a family emergency, a legal emergency. I need to take the rest of the week off." Janet looked at my face. She must have seen something terrifying there, because she didn't ask for details. She just nodded. "Go, do what you need to do." I walked out of the building. The sun was shining, bright and cheerful, which felt like a personal insult. I got into my car. I threw the folder onto the passenger seat, the same seat where I had tossed the gym membership card weeks ago. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Kendra. I called the number for the Dane County Sheriff's Department, non-emergency line. But I didn't hit send yet. I needed one more thing. I needed to look them in the eye when I dropped the hammer. I started the car and pointed it south, toward the highway, toward Madison. The drive was 4 hours. I didn't listen to music. I didn't listen to podcasts. I drove in silence, fueling the engine with a cold, hard rage. I thought about the gym membership. I thought about the family helps family speech. I thought about Kendra sleeping on my rug after photographing my life. They wanted a gym membership, fine. I was about to give them a workout they would never survive. I merged onto the interstate. The speedometer climbed. 70, 75, 80. I wasn't going home to visit. I was going home to foreclose on my family. I pulled my car into the back lot of a rest stop halfway between Minneapolis and Madison. I could not drive another mile without looking at the evidence again. The folder on the passenger seat seemed to be vibrating, radiating a heat that made the air in the car feel thin and toxic. I opened the folder. I pulled out the mortgage deed. I laid it flat on the dashboard, letting the afternoon sun hit the paper. I took a deep breath and looked at the signature on the bottom line. Brooklyn. Marie Flores. It was beautiful. It was elegant. It was a lie. I took my driver's license out of my wallet and held it next to the paper. I compared the two. The curve of the B was identical. The way the K looped up and kicked out was a perfect match. The slant of the F was precise to the millimeter. That was the problem. When a person signs their name, there are micro-variations. The hand moves with a specific rhythm, a speed that creates faint trails of lighter ink where the pen lifts or drags. A real signature has a pulse. This signature had no pulse. The ink density was uniform all the way through. The line didn't taper at the end. It was heavy, deliberate, and slow. It was a tracing. Someone had placed a piece of paper over my driver's license or perhaps an old birthday card I had signed, and carefully, painstakingly drew my name. It wasn't written. It was illustrated. I looked at the notary stamp again. Sarah Jenkins. The address was for a pack and ship on East Washington Avenue. I knew that place. It was a small, cluttered storefront that smelled of packing tape and stale popcorn. My father, Ray, had a private mailbox there for his consulting business. He had known the owner, a man named Pete, for 20 years. Sarah must have been a new employee, or maybe just someone Ray had charmed. Ray Flores could charm the skin off a snake if he needed a new pair of boots. He probably walked in there, flashed his winning smile, told a story about his daughter being stuck in Minneapolis, but needing this done for her big new investment, and convinced the notary that he was doing me a favor. He had weaponized his charisma to steal my future. I closed the folder. I didn't scream. The time for screaming was over. I needed ammunition. I drove to the nearest town with a law office that handled consumer fraud. I had found the name on a quick search while sitting in the office bathroom. Henderson and Associates. Mr. Henderson was a man in his 60s with a coffee stain on his tie and a desk buried under mountains of paper. He didn't look like a TV lawyer. He looked like a man who spent his life cleaning up other people's messes. He listened to me for 20 minutes. He looked at the documents. He looked at my credit report on his computer screen. "This is not a civil dispute, Ms. Flores," he said, his voice gravelly and serious. "This is identity theft, grand larceny, given the amount, $150,000. "Yes," I said. "And a credit card for $20,000. "You need to file a police report," he advised, leaning back in his chair. "But before you do that, you need to lock down the evidence. You need an affidavit of forgery. You need to send a demand letter to the lender via certified mail stating that the debt is fraudulent. And you need to be prepared for what happens next." "I know," I said. "They will arrest the person who did it." Mr. Henderson looked at me over his glasses. "The bank doesn't care about arrests. The bank cares about liability. Once you claim fraud, they will turn their internal investigation unit loose. They will go after the money. If the money was transferred to your parents, the bank will go after your parents. If the house was bought with that money, the bank will take the house. Are you ready for that? Because once you pull this trigger, you cannot unpull it. There is no taking it back once the fraud department gets involved." "I am ready," I said. He nodded. "Then start digging. The more you give the police, the faster this goes. Find the money trail." I left his office with a template for the affidavit and a list of instructions. I got back in my car and picked up my phone. I had one more call to make before I reached Madison. I needed to tug on the loose thread I had found earlier. I called the customer service number for the credit card company, the one with the $20,000 limit that had been opened in my name. "Security department," a woman answered. "This is Brooklyn Flores," I said, reciting my social security number and the security questions they asked. "I am looking at a statement for an account ending in 5580. I did not open this account. I am filing a police report. But I need to know something first. Ma'am, if this is fraud, we need to close the card immediately." "Close it," I said. "Freeze it, burn it. But before you do, tell me where the statements are going. Are they being mailed to Sun Prairie?" "One moment." The keyboard clattered. "No, ma'am. This is a paperless account. All statements are sent via email." "What email address?" I asked. "For security reasons, I can only confirm the email if you provide it." "Okay," I said. I took a guess. "Is it Brooklyn Flores gmail.com? No. Is it Ray Flores yahoo.com? No." I paused. I thought about the digital footprint of my family. My father used his business email for everything. My sister changed email addresses every time she forgot a password. But my mother, Linda, was a creature of habit. She had a primary email for church and family, but she had a second one she used for online shopping, coupon sites, and signing up for free trials. She didn't want cluttering her main inbox. I had set it up for her 5 years ago when she wouldn't stop complaining about spam. "Is it lindasaves55gmail.com?" I asked. The silence on the line was heavy. "Yes, ma'am," the agent said. "That is the email on file. It was verified on May 15th. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just Ray. I had held on to a tiny, foolish sliver of hope that maybe my mother didn't know. Maybe Ray had bullied her. Maybe he had done it all behind her back. But Linda Saves 55 was her private domain. She checked that account every morning for department store sales. She had received the alert that a credit card was opened in my name. She had received the monthly statements showing thousands of dollars in charges for furniture, landscaping, and probably the catering for the graduation party. She had clicked Verify. She knew. She had stood there at the party, hugging me, telling me she was proud of my independence, while she was actively monitoring the debt they were racking up in my name. "Thank you," I said to the agent. "That is all I needed." I hung up. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Aunt Nora again. I answered. "I am on my way to Madison, Nora." "Good," she said. Because I remembered something else. I called my cousin in Milwaukee, the one who used to run a car dealership with Ray back in the 90s. "I remember Uncle Jerry," I said. "I thought they had a falling out." "They did," Nora said. "Do you know why?" "Dad said Jerry tried to cheat him." "Ray always says people cheat him," Nora said, her voice dry. "The truth is, Ray needed a bridge loan to cover some bad inventory. Jerry wouldn't sign for it, so Ray signed for him." I gripped the steering wheel. "He forged Jerry's signature. He called it authorized proxy," Nora said. "He told the bank Jerry gave him verbal permission. It was a mess. Jerry didn't press charges because our mother, your grandmother, begged him not to. She paid Jerry off from her savings to keep Ray out of jail. We all pretended it never happened. We swept it under the rug to keep the family name clean." "So he has done this before," I said, "and got away with it." "He thinks he is untouchable, Brooklyn," Nora said. "He thinks that because he is the patriarch, his intentions justify his methods. He probably convinced himself he was doing it for you. In his twisted head, using your credit to buy the house keeps the family assets strong. So eventually, it benefits everyone. He doesn't see it as theft. He sees it as resource management. He is about to see it as a felony," I said. "Just be careful," Nora warned. "When a narcissist gets caught, they don't apologize. They attack. He will try to destroy you before he admits he was wrong. Make sure you have your armor on." "I am not wearing armor." "Nora," I said, staring at the highway stretching out before me as the sun began to dip below the horizon. "I am bringing the war." I ended the call. The sky turned a bruised purple, then black. I drove. I replayed every interaction of the last 3 months. The way Kendra had avoided my gaze at the party. The way my mother had been so insistent that I didn't need to help with the paperwork for the house because Dad handled it. The way Ray had laughed when he handed me the gym membership. It's a gym membership. The joke wasn't that I needed to work out. The joke was that I was paying for the very roof over their heads while they mocked me for being cheap. They had stripped me of my financial identity, my credit, and my trust, and then handed me a $10 plastic card as a consolation prize. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I could feel the leather biting into my skin. The physical pain was grounding. It kept me focused. I wasn't going there to cry. I wasn't going there to ask why. I wasn't going there to beg them to fix it. I was going there to inform them that their lease on my life had been terminated. I passed the sign for the Madison exit. Madison 5 miles. The city lights twinkled in the distance, innocent and welcoming. Somewhere in those lights was a house on Maple Drive. A house filled with new furniture bought with my credit card. A house where my sister was probably sleeping, thinking she had successfully scared me off or guilted me into silence. I checked the time. It was 8:45 at night. They would be home. They would be watching television in the living room, surrounded by the comfort bought with my stolen name. I reached over and touched the folder on the passenger seat one last time. It felt heavy, like a brick. I took the exit. The ramp curved, and I merged onto the local road. The familiar landmarks of my childhood ghosted past the window, the mall, the high school, the park where I used to play. It all looked the same, yet entirely different. It was like looking at a movie set after you have seen the backstage rot. I turned onto the street that led to my parents' house. I wasn't going to the new house in Sun Prairie. I was going to the source. I pulled into the driveway of the house where I grew up. The lights were on. I could see the blue flicker of the television through the front window. I killed the engine. The silence in the car was absolute. I grabbed the folder. I grabbed my keys. I didn't tremble. My heartbeat was slow, heavy, and dangerous. I stepped out of the car and slammed the door. The sound echoed in the quiet suburban night. I walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used the key I had kept on my ring for 10 years. The key to the house I was told was my forever home, the home of the family that loved me. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. I pushed the door open and stepped into the warmth of the hallway. "Who is that?" my mother's voice called from the living room. "Kendra, did you forget your keys again?" I walked down the hall, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I stepped into the living room. Ray was in his recliner. Linda was on the sofa. They both looked up. Their smiles froze. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Hello, Ray." I dropped the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy, flat thud that sounded like the closing of a coffin lid. "We need to talk," I said, and this time, nobody is laughing. The living room of my childhood home was warm, smelling faintly of lemon polish, and the pot roast my mother must have cooked for dinner, a dinner I was not invited to a stranger. It looked like a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting. My father, Ray, was settled in his leather recliner, the one he had declared his throne 20 years ago. My mother, Linda, sat on the floral sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, but the cozy domesticity was shattered the moment I stepped fully into the light. I saw Kendra. She was curled up on the love seat in the corner, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost $300 paid for, I now knew, by me. She looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing. "She is here," Kendra announced, her voice dripping with that familiar mix of boredom and disdain. "I told you she would come crawling back to apologize." Ray shifted in his chair, the leather creaking loudly in the silence. He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. His face was flushed, likely from the wine I saw half-finished on the side table. "Well," Ray grunted, "at least you have the decency to show up in person. We were just discussing your behavior. Brooklyn, throwing your sister out on the street, treating family like criminals. It is disgusting." "Sit down," Linda said, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to pray about your anger." I did not sit down. I did not pray. I walked to the center of the room. Standing directly between the television and my father, I blocked his view of the evening news. "Turn it off," I said. Ray blinked. "Excuse me." "The TV," I said. "Turn it off, or I will break it." My tone was so flat, so devoid of the usual deference I showed him, that he actually listened. He picked up the remote and clicked the screen to black. "You have 5 minutes to explain yourself before I call the police," Ray snapped, trying to regain control. "You come into my house, disrespect your mother." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I didn't hand it to him. I fanned the documents out on the coffee table like a dealer laying down a royal flush: the warranty deed, the mortgage agreement, the home equity line of credit, the credit card statement, the affidavit of forgery template I had received from the lawyer. "Explain," I said. The room went dead silent. Ray looked at the papers. I saw his eyes recognize the Sovereign Lending logo. I saw the muscle in his jaw jump. Linda gasped. She reached out and touched the edge of the credit card statement, her fingers shaking. "Where did you get these?" Linda whispered. "Public records," I said. "And a very helpful conversation with the fraud department at the bank." Kendra sat up straight, dropping her legs from the arm of the love seat. She looked at the papers, then at me. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. "So you found out," Kendra said. "Big deal. Why do you have to be so dramatic about everything?" "Dramatic," I repeated. "You stole my identity. You opened a line of credit for $150,000 in my name. You maxed out a credit card for $20,000. You forged my signature." "We didn't steal anything," Ray roared, slamming his hand down on the armrest. He stood up, towering over me, using his physical size to intimidate me the way he had when I was 16. "We borrowed it. It is a loan. Brooklyn, a loan means you pay it back." "You didn't borrow it," I said. not flinching. You took it. Borrowing requires consent. I was not there. I did not sign this. I pointed to the signature on the mortgage document. Look at that. May 12th, I was in Minneapolis. You traced my signature. You went to your friend Sarah at the shipping store, and you had her stamp it illegal. Ray's face turned a darker shade of red. I did what I had to do. The bank was giving us the runaround. They wanted more collateral. They wanted a higher income-to-debt ratio. You have the credit score. You have the income. It was just a formality. A formality. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. It is a felony. Ray, it is called bank fraud. It is called identity theft. It was for your sister, Linda cried out, tears instantly spilling down her cheeks. She needed a home. Brooklyn, you know how hard she has had it. She needed a fresh start. We couldn't let the deal fall through just because of some red tape at the bank. We were going to tell you. When? I asked. When were you going to tell me? When the foreclosure notice showed up at my work. Linda froze. What? That is right, I said. You didn't pay the bill. You took the money. You bought the house. You threw the party. You laughed at me with your gym membership joke, and then you stopped paying the loan. The default notice came to my office today. Everyone in my mailroom knows I'm delinquent on a $150,000 debt. We were going to make the payment next week, Ray shouted. I have a deal closing. Cash flow is just tight right now. You are always tight, my Ray, I said. That is why you stole my credit, because you ruined yours years ago. Don't you speak to your father that way, Linda shrieked. He works hard for this family. He works hard at grilling steaks and pretending to be rich, I corrected. But he paid for this house with my future. I turned to Kendra. She was quiet, watching us like it was a tennis match. And you, I said. You knew, Kendra shrugged. Dad said he handled it. He said he put you on the deed so it would stay in the family. I didn't ask questions. Liar, I said. You told me at my apartment that changing the locks wouldn't matter because you had the keys to the history. You knew my name was on that paper. That is why you were photographing my tax returns. You were trying to find documents to backfill the application in case the bank audited the file. Kendra rolled her eyes. Okay, fine, I knew. So what, the house is in my name too. It is an asset. Brooklyn, you should be thanking us. When the market goes up, we all make money. You are so obsessed with rules you can't see the investment. It is not an investment, I said. It is a liability, and it is about to be a foreclosure. It is only a foreclosure if you don't pay it, Kendra snapped. You have money. Why didn't you just pay the $4,000 when the notice came? Why did you have to come here and make a scene? You are so selfish. You would rather see me lose my house than spend a little bit of your precious savings. I stared at her. The entitlement was so pure, so absolute. It was almost breathtaking. She genuinely believed that my role in life was to be the fuel she burned to keep herself warm. I am not paying it, I said slowly. I am not paying a single cent. Then you ruin your own credit, Ray shouted. You cut off your nose to spite your face if that loan defaults. You go down with us. Do you think you are smarter than me? You are trapped. Brooklyn, you have to pay it to save yourself. He grinned then, a shark-like, triumphant grin. He thought he had me. He thought that by tying me to the anchor, he could force me to swim for all of us. That is where you are wrong, I said. I picked up the affidavit of forgery. I spoke to a lawyer today, I said, and I spoke to the police. The grin vanished from Ray's face. I haven't filed the official report yet, I said. I wanted to give you one chance, not because I love you, but because I don't want to spend the next year testifying in court if I don't have to. I looked at my watch. It is 9 o'clock. You have until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. To do what? Linda whispered. To sell the house, I said. To liquidate your retirement accounts. To sell your cars. I don't care how you do it. But you need to pay off that home equity line of credit in full. And you need to close the credit card. And you need to sign a notarized statement admitting that you forged my signature without my knowledge. You are insane, Ray spat. We can't raise $170,000 overnight. Then you go to prison, I said. You wouldn't dare, Ray sneered. You wouldn't put your own father in jail. Think about what people would say. Think about the church. Think about your reputation. My reputation? I asked. My reputation is defaulted borrower right now because of you. I don't care about the church, Ray. And I certainly don't care about what your golf buddies think. We are your parents, Linda wailed. We gave you life. And now you are trying to take it back, I said. You are cannibalizing me. You are eating my future to feed Kendra's ego. It is just a house, Kendra yelled, standing up now. Why are you so jealous? Is this because you are 32 and single and living in an apartment? You can't stand that I have something better than you. You have nothing. I turned on her, my voice finally rising. Just a fraction. You own nothing, Kendra. That house is fake. Your degree is paid for by Dad. Your car is leased in his name, and now your house is stolen in mine. You are a paper doll, and I am bringing a match. Kendra flinched as if I had slapped her. Ray stepped forward, his fists clenched. Get out of my house. With pleasure, I said. But understand this. If I don't have confirmation from the bank by 9:01 tomorrow morning that the debt is cleared or that you have confessed to fraud, I am handing this folder to the Dane County District Attorney, and I will prosecute. I will press charges against you for forgery. I will press charges against you for identity theft, and I will press charges against Kendra for conspiracy. You are bluffing, Ray said, though he looked pale. Family doesn't sue family. You broke the contract first, I said. The moment you signed my name, you stopped being family. You became liabilities. I looked at Linda. She was sobbing into her hands, rocking back and forth. I am sorry, Linda, I said. But tears won't pay the bank. I turned around and walked toward the door. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I kept my back straight. I didn't run. If you walk out that door, Ray screamed after me, his voice cracking with desperation, don't you ever come back. I will write you out of the will. You will get nothing. I stopped at the threshold. I didn't turn around. Ray, I said, loud enough for them to hear clearly. Look at this room. Look at your debt. There is nothing to inherit. I opened the door and walked out into the cool night air. I expected them to chase me. I expected Ray to come running down the driveway with a tire iron or for Linda to grab my leg. But as I walked to my car, the only sound was the wind in the trees. They didn't chase me. They didn't scream. For the first time in my life, the house was silent. They weren't silent because they were dismissing me. They were silent because they were doing the math. They were realizing that the gym membership daughter, the one they mocked, the one they used, the one they thought was too weak to fight back, had just put a gun to their heads. I got into my car and locked the doors. I looked back at the house one last time. The blue light of the television had not come back on. Through the window, I could see them. They were standing exactly where I left them, frozen, like statues in a museum of bad decisions. I started the engine. My hands were steady. I drove away. I didn't go to a hotel. I drove straight to the 24-hour police station I had passed on the way in. I wasn't bluffing, and deep down, in the terror of that silence, they knew it. 9 o'clock, I whispered to the dashboard. I parked the car. I didn't go in yet. I just sat there, watching the clock on the dash tick from 9:15 to 9:16. I was giving them the night. It was the last gift I would ever give them. The deadline of 9 o'clock in the morning came and went without a payment confirmation. There was no apology. There was no notification from Sovereign Lending that the balance on the home equity line of credit had been satisfied. Instead, at 9:05, the war began. It didn't start with a bang, but with a buzz. My phone, which I had set to silent mode while sitting at my desk at Northbridge Data Services, lit up with a text message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since I was 12. I can't believe you are blackmailing Uncle Ray. After everything he has done for you, you are sick. I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. I blocked the number. 2 minutes later, another text came through from my Aunt Susan. We are praying for your soul. Brooklyn, trying to extort your parents because you are jealous of Kendra's house is a new low. God sees everything. I put the phone face down. They were fast. In the 12 hours since I had left their living room, Ray and Linda had spun a narrative so tight and efficient it was almost impressive. They hadn't told the family. We stole Brooklyn's identity. They had told the family. Brooklyn is demanding money from us because she is bitter about Kendra's success. They were betting on the fact that the family already viewed me as the cold one, the outsider. They used the gym membership incident the very moment they humiliated me as proof of my grudge. I opened my laptop and logged into the police reporting portal. I had saved the draft last night. I clicked submit. The case number generated instantly. I was not bluffing, but they were not done. At 10 o'clock, my personal cell phone pinged with a message from Kendra. It wasn't a plea for help this time. It was a picture. It was a screenshot of my LinkedIn profile. Underneath the image, she had typed, "It would be a shame if Northbridge found out their lead data analyst has a history of financial instability. People who manage sensitive data need to be trustworthy." Right? My blood turned to ice. In my industry, financial integrity is a condition of employment. We handled proprietary data for Fortune 500 companies. A background check was mandatory. If an employee was flagged for fraud, embezzlement, or massive defaulted debt, they were considered a security risk. Kendra wasn't just trying to scare me. She was threatening to burn down the only thing I had built for myself, my career. I didn't respond. I knew that if I engaged, I gave her power. I tried to focus on my work. I tried to audit a spreadsheet, but the numbers swam before my eyes. At 11:15, an email notification popped up on my screen. It was from the Vice President of Human Resources, a woman named Janet, who had always been kind to me. Subject: urgent meeting. Brooklyn, please come to my office immediately. I felt the floor drop out from under me. They had done it. They had actually done it. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I grabbed the folder, the same folder I had thrown on my parents' coffee table the night before, which I had retrieved and updated with the police report number. I walked down the hallway. My legs felt heavy, but I forced myself to walk with a rhythmic, confident cadence. I was not the criminal here. I knocked on Janet's door. "Come in," she said. Her voice was cool, professional, lacking its usual warmth. I stepped inside. Janet was sitting behind her desk. She held a printed piece of paper in her hand. "Brooklyn, have a seat," she said. "We received an anonymous email this morning via the ethics hotline portal. Usually, we investigate these quietly, but the allegations are specific and concerning regarding your financial standing and potential legal exposure." She slid the paper across the desk. It was a rant. It accused me of hiding massive debt, defrauding family members, and being under investigation for extortion. It was written in a voice that tried to sound objective, but reeked of Kendra's petty vocabulary. "Janet," I said, not touching the paper, "this email was sent by my sister, Kendra Flores, or my father, Ray Flores." Janet blinked. "Excuse me. I am currently the victim of a sophisticated identity theft ring." I said clearly, "The perpetrators are my immediate family members." I opened my folder. I placed the police report on her desk. Next to it, I placed the affidavit of forgery. Next to that, I placed the letter from the credit bureaus confirming the freeze I had placed on my accounts. Yesterday, I confronted them with evidence that they used my Social Security number to secure a loan of $150,000 and a credit card of $20,000 without my consent. I explained. They threatened to ruin my reputation if I reported them. I reported them at 9:05 this morning. This email arrived shortly after. Janet picked up the police report. Her eyes scanned the official seal, the case number, and the summary of the crime. "My financial background was clean when you hired me," I continued, "and it will be clean again once the fraud investigation concludes. I am fully cooperating with the Dane County Sheriff's Department and the Fraud Division of Sovereign Lending. I wanted to bring this to you myself, but they moved faster than I anticipated. Janet let out a long breath. She looked from the police report to the anonymous email. The contrast was stark. One was a legal document. The other was a hysterical, unsigned note. "Okay," Janet said. She ripped the anonymous email in half and dropped it into her shredder. "Thank you for being transparent. Brooklyn, Northbridge supports its employees, especially when they are victims of crimes. If they contact you here again, let security know. We can block their domains." "Thank you," I said. I walked out of her office. My knees were shaking. But I had won the skirmish. They tried to use my job as leverage, but they forgot one thing: professional people respect documentation. My family only respected noise. I went back to my desk. My phone rang. It was Aunt Nora. "Hey," I answered. "They are attacking." "I know," Nora said. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "Ray called me. He told me you were off your meds. I told him I didn't know you were on meds. He hung up." "I filed the police report," I said, "and I shut down an attempt to get me fired." "Good," Nora said, "but that is not why I am calling. I found something. Brooklyn. Or rather, I remembered something that has been bothering me for 10 years. "What is it?" "Your grandmother," Nora said. "My mom. When she died, she had a small safe deposit box at a local bank in Madison, the First National on the square." "I remember," I said. "Dad said it was empty. He said she lost the key years before she died." "Ray says a lot of things." Nora said, "I was going through my old papers today, looking for a receipt, and I found a letter Mom sent me a month before she passed. She wrote that she had put a spare key to the box in the lining of her favorite purse, the one she gave me." I sat up straighter. "You have the key." "I have the key," Nora said. "And I called the bank. The box is still active. The fees have been paid automatically from a small trust she left behind. But here is the kicker. Brooklyn. The box isn't in Ray's name. It is not in my name. It is in yours. Mine. She put it in your name when you turned 18, Nora said. She told me she wanted you to have a runaway fund. She didn't trust Ray. She never said it out loud to him. But she knew he was a hole in his pocket where his conscience should be. Why didn't I know about this? Because the bank notices went to the house, Nora said. To Ray's address. He must have been intercepting them for years, hiding them, hoping the state would eventually claim the box as abandoned property, so he could file a claim as the executor, but he couldn't open it without you. I am coming to get the key, I said. I will overnight it. Nora said, go to the bank tomorrow. Find out what he was so afraid of you finding. The next morning, I stood in the vault of the First National Bank. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and steel. The bank manager, a stern woman who checked my ID 3 times, led me to a small metal door in the wall. I inserted the key Nora had sent. The manager inserted her master key. Click, the box slid out. It was heavy. I carried it to a private viewing room and sat down. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. There was no cash. There was no jewelry. There was a stack of government savings bonds. I counted them quickly. $50,000 in bonds, purchased over 20 years. And underneath the bonds, there was a letter. The handwriting was shaky, but the ink was dark and permanent. My dearest Brooklyn, if you are reading this, it means you finally got away from them. I hope you did. Your father is a man who believes the world owes him a living, and he will use anyone to collect that debt, even his children. I am leaving these bonds for you, but I am also leaving you this warning. Ray didn't just borrow money from your Uncle Jerry. He took a loan out in your grandfather's name when your grandfather was in hospice. He signed a dying man's name to buy a car. He has done this before. He will do it again. Do not let him hold your history hostage. You are the only one in that house with a spine. Use it. Love. Grandma. I put the letter down. I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away instantly. This was the missing piece. Ray wasn't just panicked about the house in Sun Prairie. He wasn't just worried about his credit score. He was terrified because he knew that if I started pulling at the thread of financial fraud, I wouldn't just find the house, I would find a pattern. I would find a history of elder abuse and systemic theft that went back decades. He had silenced me for years, kept me feeling small and selfish, because he knew that if I ever looked too closely at the books, I would see that the entire Flores lifestyle was a Ponzi scheme built on the identities of his relatives. I put the bonds and the letter into my bag. I walked out of the bank and called the detective who had been assigned to my case that morning. "Detective Miller," I said, "this is Brooklyn Flores. I have new evidence, and I think you need to widen the scope of your investigation." "What do you have?" Miller asked. He sounded tired, but interested. "I have evidence that the suspect has a history of posthumous identity theft," I said, "and I have a witness who can testify to prior acts of forgery." "Bring it in," Miller said. The dominoes started to fall that afternoon. It wasn't a loud crash. It was a series of frantic phone calls that I refused to answer. First, the title company called. They had received the fraud alert from the bank. They were on the hook for the insurance policy on the house. They were sending an investigator to interview the notary. Then, the notary called. I didn't know her number, but she left a voicemail. She was crying. "Ms. Flores, please, this is Sarah from Pack and Ship. Your father told me you were on the phone. He said it was an emergency I didn't know. Please don't press charges. I have kids." I saved the voicemail. It was a confession. Ray had coerced her, but she had still stamped a false document. She was the weak link. By 4 o'clock, the bank had frozen the home equity line of credit. The funds were locked. The credit card was shut down. And then, the call I had been waiting for came. It wasn't Ray. It wasn't Linda. It wasn't Kendra. It was an investigator from the fraud unit of Sovereign Lending. "Ms. Flores," the man said. His voice was clipped, military precise. "My name is Agent Holloway. I am reviewing your affidavit." "Yes," I said. "We have cross-referenced the Social Security number used on the application with other databases," Holloway said. "We found something disturbing." "What?" "There are 3 other accounts associated with your father's address that have been flagged for irregular activity," Holloway said. "One in your name, from when you were 18, a student loan you apparently never applied for, and 2 others." "2 others?" "Yes," Holloway said. "In the name of a Kendra Flores, but looking at the payment history, it appears those loans were defaulted on and then consolidated into the loan that is currently in your name." I stopped walking. I was standing in the middle of the sidewalk, people rushing past me. "Wait," I said. "Are you saying he stole Kendra's identity first?" "It appears so," Holloway said. "He ruined her credit 4 years ago. That is likely why she couldn't qualify for the house on her own. He used her up, and when she was dry, he moved on to you." The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. Kendra wasn't just the golden child. She was the first victim. She knew. That was why she was so desperate. That was why she helped him. She wasn't just entitled. She was trapped. Ray had destroyed her financial existence years ago, and she had made a devil's bargain she would stay quiet. She would play the role of the spoiled princess, and in exchange, he would fix it by finding a new host to bleed. Me, I was the replacement battery. "Thank you, Agent Holloway," I said. "Do what you have to do." "We are issuing a referral to the district attorney," Holloway said. "This is racketeering." I hung up the phone. The sun was setting over the city. I looked at the glass skyscrapers reflecting the orange light. I felt a strange, hollow sense of vindication. They had tried to bury me. They had tried to take my name, my credit, and my dignity. They had tried to paint me as the villain in their soap opera. But they had forgotten the one rule of data analysis. If you look at the numbers long enough, they always tell the truth. And the truth was, my father wasn't a patriarch, he was a parasite, and my mother and sister weren't just enablers. They were fellow hosts, rotting from the inside out. I walked to my car. I had one more stop to make. I wasn't going back to Wisconsin. I was going to a real estate agent. I had $50,000 in bonds and a credit score that was about to be scrubbed clean by the police report. I was going to buy a house, a real house, one that I paid for, one that no one could take away. But first, I sent one final text to the family group chat, the one I had been added to by my cousin earlier that day, to shame me. I attached the photo of Grandma's letter, and I attached the voicemail from the notary. I wrote 5 words: "The gym membership is expired." Then I threw the SIM card out the window. The collapse of the Flores family empire did not look like an explosion in a movie. It looked like paperwork. It looked like a series of certified letters, court summons, and quiet, devastating emails from legal departments. It was boring, bureaucratic, and absolutely lethal. 48 hours after I handed the evidence to Detective Miller, the first domino hit the table. Sarah Jenkins, the notary at the Packenship, did not hold up under questioning. She was not a hardened criminal. She was a woman with 2 kids and a mortgage who had been bullied by a charismatic local businessman. When the police showed her the affidavit of forgery and mentioned the possibility of jail time, she cracked. She admitted that Ray had brought the documents in alone. She admitted that Ray had told her I was stuck in traffic and that he had my verbal authorization. She admitted that she stamped the papers because she trusted a friend. Her confession was the nail in the coffin. It transformed the situation from a family dispute into a documented felony. Sovereign lending moved with a speed that was terrifying to behold. Once they had the police report and the notary's statement, they didn't just freeze the line of credit, they accelerated the debt. There is a clause in every mortgage contract called the fraud provision. It basically says that if any part of the application is found to be false, the entire balance is due immediately. $150,000, due in 24 hours. My father, Ray, tried to negotiate. He called the bank's legal department. He tried to use his charm. He tried to offer them a payment plan. He told them he had a big deal closing next month. That would cover everything. But banks do not care about deals closing next month. Banks care about collateral. When Ray realized the bank wasn't listening, he tried to call me. He called from his cell, then from Linda's cell, then from a payphone, which I didn't even know still existed. I didn't answer a single one. I let every call go to voicemail. I listened to them later. Sitting in my quiet apartment with a glass of wine, the progression of his voice was a case study in narcissism. Voicemail 1. "Brooklyn, this is ridiculous. Pick up the phone so we can fix this misunderstanding." Voicemail 3. "You are destroying this family over money. You are selfish." Voicemail 7. Please, Brooklyn, they are going to take the house. Your mother is sick with worry. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you authorized it." It was too late for lies. The truth had already been filed with the county clerk. The gift house in Sun Prairie, the symbol of Kendra's supposed success, was foreclosed upon in record time. Because the loan was fraudulent, the bank moved to seize the asset to recoup their losses. They didn't care that Kendra had moved in her furniture. They didn't care that she had painted the walls sage green. I wasn't there when the sheriff served the eviction notice, but Aunt Nora was. She told me about it later with a grim sort of satisfaction. She said a deputy sheriff taped the notice to the front door, right over the wreath Kendra had hung up for her Instagram photos. She said Ray was standing in the driveway, screaming at the officer, threatening to sue the city, the bank, and me. But screaming at the law is like screaming at the tide. It doesn't stop the water from coming in. The real twist, however, wasn't the legal battle. It was the social one. Ray and Linda had spent decades curating their image. They were the perfect couple, the generous parents, the pillars of the community. They had tried to paint me as the villain, the jealous sister who was blackmailing them. But the legal system is public. In our small Wisconsin town, people read the legal notices in the newspaper. They saw the foreclosure filing. They saw the names listed: Ray Flores, Kendra Flores, and they saw the cause of action: fraudulent conveyance, identity theft, the gossip mill, which Ray had tried to weaponize against me, suddenly turned on him. My cousin, the one who had sent me the nasty text message accusing me of extortion. Sent a follow-up text a week later. I saw the newspaper. I'm sorry. I didn't know he forged your signature. That is messed up. I didn't reply to him either. I didn't need his apology. I needed his silence. Kendra's downfall was less dignified. With the house seized and her credit ruined again, she had nowhere to go. She couldn't go back to Ray and Linda's house because the tension there was nuclear. Ray blamed Kendra for getting caught with the photos. Linda blamed Ray for the forgery. The house of cards had collapsed, and they were all suffocating under the debris. Kendra found me one last time. It was 2 weeks after the foreclosure. I was walking to my car after work. I saw her sitting on the curb near the entrance of the parking garage. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She stood up when she saw me. She didn't look angry. She looked exhausted. "Are you happy?" she asked. Her voice was raspy. "You won. I am homeless. Again. The bank took the house. Mom and Dad are probably going to lose their house too because of the legal fees. You destroyed everything." I stopped. I looked at her, and I felt a strange emotion. It wasn't pity. It wasn't hate. It was clarity. "I didn't destroy anything. Kendra," I said. "I just turned on the lights." "You could have just paid it," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You have a job. You have savings. It was just money to you. To me, it was my life. It was my chance to be someone." "It wasn't your chance," I said. "It was a lie. You can't build a life on a foundation that doesn't exist. Ray ruined your credit years ago." "Didn't he?" Kendra flinched. She looked down at the pavement. "How did you know?" "The fraud investigator told me," I said. "He saw the old defaulted loans in your name. Ray used you up. Kendra, he stole your identity when you were barely legal, and instead of fighting him, you joined him. You let him do the same thing to me just so you could pretend to be successful." "He said he would fix it," she whispered. "He said if we bought the house, the equity would pay off my old debts. He said it was the only way." "He lied," I said. "He always lies. You weren't the owner of that house. Kendra, you were the bait. You were the prop he used to convince the neighbors he was still a big shot." "You ruined my life," she repeated, but the conviction was gone. She sounded like a child reciting a line she didn't understand. "No," I said firmly. "You ruined your life. You chose the shortcut. You chose to steal from your sister instead of working for yourself. They used my life to cover up the mess they made of yours. But I took my life back." I unlocked my car door. "Where are you going?" she asked. Can I come? Just for dinner. I am hungry." "Brooklyn." It was the same request she had made at my apartment door. "I am hungry." It was the eternal cry of the Flores family. They were always hungry for things they hadn't earned. "No," I said. "I am going home. My home. You need to figure this out. Kendra. For real this time. Without Dad. And without me." I got in the car and closed the door. She stood there, watching me. A ghost of a sister I might have loved if she hadn't been hollowed out by our parents' greed. I drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. The aftermath took months to settle. I worked with a credit restoration specialist to scrub the fraudulent accounts from my report. It was a tedious process involving affidavits, police reports, and endless letters to bureaus. But piece by piece, the red flags disappeared. My score began to climb back up. The debt was legally transferred back to Ray, who was now facing criminal charges. Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, told me that Ray pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of fraud to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. He received probation, a massive fine, and a permanent criminal record. His business collapsed. His reputation in the community was incinerated. Linda stood by him, of course, playing the role of the martyr, telling anyone who would listen that their daughter had betrayed them. But they were alone. The holiday parties stopped. The family helps family speeches ended. I didn't just survive. I thrived. 6 months after the gym membership incident, I walked into a different bank, a bank where nobody knew my father's name. I carried the satchel containing the savings bonds my grandmother had left me. $50,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was clean money. It was money that had been hidden from Ray's grasping hands for 2 decades. I cashed the bonds. I combined them with my own savings. I bought a house. It wasn't a mansion in some prairie. It was a small, 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in Minneapolis. It had a porch that needed painting and a garden that was overgrown. But the foundation was solid. I remember the day of the closing. I sat in a conference room with a title agent who was a stranger. She slid a stack of documents across the table. "Okay, Ms. Flores," she said, handing me a pen. "We just need your signature here, and here." I took the pen. It was a heavy black ballpoint. I looked at the line, Brooklyn Marie Flores. For a moment, I flashed back to the forged document, the signature that looked too perfect, the tracing of a life that wasn't real. Then, I looked at my hand. It was steady. I signed my name, my real signature. It had a rhythm. It had a pulse. It had the slight tremor of a living, breathing human being who had fought a war to own the right to hold this pen. I didn't send a photo of the house to my parents. I didn't post it on social media with a caption about being blessed. I didn't invite anyone to a housewarming party. I just moved in. On my first night in the new house, I unpacked a box of books. I found the gym membership card tucked into an old journal. I had kept it as a souvenir. I looked at it. Planet Fitness. I walked to the kitchen, my kitchen, and picked up a pair of scissors. I cut the card into 4 pieces. I dropped the pieces into the trash. The gym membership had been meant to be an insult, a message that I needed to improve myself, a distraction to keep me feeling small while they stole my future. But in the end, it was the greatest gift they could have given me. It was the wake-up call that forced me to stop running on their treadmill and start running toward my own freedom. I stood on my back porch, drinking a cup of tea, listening to the wind in the trees. It was silent. There were no phone calls, no demands for money, no emotional blackmail. I had lost my parents. I had lost my sister. I had lost the illusion of a happy family. But as I looked out at the moon rising over a yard that belonged to me and only me, I realized I hadn't lost anything that was real. I had simply evicted the tenants who never paid their rent. I don't need their apology. I don't need them to admit they were wrong. I don't need to win the argument at the Christmas dinner table, because I won't be there. I only need one thing. From this day forward, until the day I die, no one writes my story but me. And absolutely no one signs my name. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I really hope it serves as a reminder to protect your own peace and your own name, no matter who tries to take them. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas like this, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help us share these stories with more people.